Joined via the Zoom line by Joselynn Fember, attorney and managing partner at Fember Attorneys. Joselynn, thank you so much once again for your time, just to help us make sense of these latest developments and essentially what this now means for this particular trial.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's absolutely peculiar and devastating, the milestones that have been put in this matter. There are so many roadblocks, and I think the saddest part is that the victims of this crime are just going to be facing further delays. The withdrawal of the attorney of record for accused number 1 to 4 essentially would mean that a further delay will be incumbent in this matter. But I think what's important to note is that the judge did indicate to the accused that they will have an opportunity to source alternative legal representation, and they can either elect to get a private attorney, or they can, if they cannot afford a private attorney, if they cannot source a private attorney for any reason, they can then apply for legal aid. But we know that these processes take time. Briefing a new legal representative may not happen overnight, and I think what's critical to mention is that Judge Maumela specifically said that if the accused do not timeously procure legal representation by the time that this matter is back in court in August, then the matter may actually have to proceed in the absence of that legal representation. So I think that is a little bit of a reprieve for the trial itself. We know that only one witness has been examined and has been on the stand so far. We are in the very early stages of this trial, and in my opinion, too much has happened. The victims of this heinous tragedy need closure, and I think that is the point of Judge Maumela having said that they need to get on to obtaining new legal representation, instructing new attorneys of record, so that this matter can proceed.
Of course, another question is, they were being represented by one counsel, that's Advocate Defo. Do you think that they will continue to cluster themselves and be represented by one counsel? I mean, the judge also gave them the option of representing themselves, but I hear you on the fact that either way, it will take more time and the delays are inevitable.
Yes, I definitely think that it would depend on accused number 1 to 4, whether they decide to get the same attorney of record or whether they make decisions regarding individual representatives. Either way, those representatives need to be fully apprised of the events that have transpired in this matter. So it may very well end up in a situation where if they brief new legal representatives, they would need to then obtain transcripts of the record, which takes a very long time. Those transcripts would need to be, so for instance, the audio would need to be cut at court, those transcripts would need to be put on paper, and that is an independent process that is outsourced, and it does take quite a long period of time for that to happen. Whether or not the court will indulge further postponements for that purpose, we don't know yet, because the judge has made a stance on how the matter is going to progress in light of this new development. So it'll be very interesting to see whether or not the court will be lenient towards the accused, because of course it's not their fault that this has happened, and they also have a right to a fair trial, and they have a right to make out defense with legal representatives of their choice. So they might very well come back to court. I think the matter was postponed to the 2nd of August for this purpose, so they might come back to court and they might say, we haven't had a fair opportunity to consult with our legal representatives. And they have that right. They have the right to a fair trial. And that might result in a further postponement. How many postponements the court will entertain is a completely different story, but it will be very interesting to see how this unfolds.
The things, of course, that Advocate Defo was at pains to argue in court. I mean, he made several arguments, but one of them is obviously maintaining the innocence of his 4 clients, and also trying to put across the fact that especially clients 1 and 2, and those are accused 1 and 2, have been ill-treated, by the state, treated unfairly. Their constitutional rights, were denied during the time of the arrest. And of course, we saw today the witness on the stand, accused number 3, talking about ill treatment in prison currently. And of course, on the sidelines of this trial, we also saw Advocate Tefo trying to say that those in power are behind the murder and the death of Senzo Meyiwa, and that there are elements within the state that are trying very hard not to make this case proceed fairly. Now, somebody coming in as a new counsel, where do they even begin in terms of this narrative? I mean, do they even have to follow on what Advocate Tefo's strategy was trying to be?
You see, the things that happen on the sideline are largely persuasive in terms of the public interest in the matter. But what happens in court is an entirely different story. And I think we saw that the last time Advocate Tefo led evidence from the bar saying that his clients were allegedly being tortured in prison. I think that's led to a situation where he's had to bring a formal application, but also the letter that he had attempted to read in court. Those letters were not presented to Advocate Mshololo and Advocate George Baloyi. So there was obviously an objection to that. The point that I'm trying to make is that there are certain procedures that need to be followed. And I think we've seen in this case that all of the comments that are happening in the sidelines and all of the applications that have been attempted to be brought by the defense have been sidelined because the court has been very strict on this is a criminal trial. There's a specific procedure that needs to be followed. Everything that's happening in between is simply ancillary. It cannot guide what the court does in the future. So the fact that Advocate Tefo is saying that his clients have not committed this heinous crime is something. But proving their innocence in court in the form of a formal defense is something completely different. And I think that's what the public needs to understand, is that there obviously are theories in the public domain about what has transpired here. But ultimately, the state needs to prove that the people in the dock have committed this crime. And if the state can't prove that, then they will be acquitted of that crime. And that is what the incoming counsel will have to deal with. They will simply have to carry the case forward from where Advocate Tefo and his attorney of record started out, and they will have to put together defenses for their clients.
Advocate Tefo, just outside the court, when he was obviously asked, he removed himself after withdrawing, he told our senior reporter Criselda Lewis that one of the reasons that he has decided to withdraw was, of course, the contentious relationship that he had with Judge Chifiwa Maumela and how this case was particularly handled. I mean, one can't ignore the heated exchanges that we saw over, during this trial between the judge and Advocate Tefo. What do we make of those exchanges?
Well, there are certain circumstances under which an attorney of record or an advocate can withdraw from a matter, and those circumstances are largely regulated by the Code of Ethics and the rules whereby we are regulated by. Whether Advocate Tefo's reasons fall within the ambit of those ethical guidelines and principles is something that is to be determined in the future, because I didn't have the benefit of actually hearing what he had said after the court hearing. But I think it would be interesting to find out what the substance of that withdrawal is, because that will tell us whether or not the withdrawal was within the ambit of the Legal Practice Act. But I think that whoever takes over really has a large task ahead of them, because as much as this trial hasn't proceeded very far, we're only on witness number one, a lot has happened. So there's a lot for any future legal representative to acquaint themselves with. And like I had said earlier, the effect of this on the victims of this crime and just on the criminal justice system as a whole. I mean, you have people looking from the outside, members of the public looking at this process and thinking, if the criminal justice system operates this way, how much relief is it actually bringing to victims of crimes in South Africa? And I think that's a bigger picture that everyone needs to just keep in the back of their minds is, we always say the wheels of justice turn slowly, but this is extremely slow.
Thank you so much for your time. Of course, we gave you very little notice for this interview, given those developments. Thank you so much for your time. That was Joselynn Fember, just giving us an update there in terms of the developments in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial. Well, if you've just joined us, the trial essentially was postponed yet again today, of course, following the dramatic withdrawal of Advocate Malisela Tefo from the case. Now, as you know, he was representing accused numbers 1 to 4. he will no longer be representing accused 1 to 4, but he says, and as he was telling our reporter Criselda Lewis just outside court, he will remain on watching brief for the family. Of course, this is a case of wait to see in terms of what that exactly means. I mean, of course, as you've heard, from our various analysts and, of course, our reporters on the ground itself, no doubt a big blow to the murder trial, of course, to the Senzo Meyiwa family, and, of course, to the 4 accused who are waiting, to hear this case and follow through. I believe a lot of them saying that Advocate Defo is their last resort and that they were really hoping to see their day in court and also to have these charges against them dropped.